A Passion for Mushrooms by Chronological. Chapter 26. Clear Evidence of Affection. Gandalf's first words to Bilbo when they had been left alone for a few minutes of a tea were,
"I am astounded to find you are not yet married. Whatever are you waiting for, my dear boy?"
Spluttering in outrage, Bilbo gave the wizard to understand that he had never, even once in his life, been in a position to seriously consider marriage, knew of no potential candidates for a spouse, and would thank interfering big people to keep their oversized noses to themselves.
Looking down at the hobbit sternly, Gandalf said, "Am I supposed to forget that I saw you feed Thorin with your own fork in front of all the mountain not 6 months ago?"
Defeated, Bilbo toyed with his teacup. It was unfortunately dwarvish that they were having only tea for tea. There was not even a single biscuit to grant the hobbit solace in his time of disappointment. "I offered him my magic ring. He did not want it." Gandalf looked a bit surprised at this news.
"Well then, I am sorry for bringing it up, Bilbo. You are quite right. It is none of my business. In light of that, are you entirely certain you can't remain in Adamor? I might have a little time to see you home after the celebrations."
Just as Gandalf asked this question, they were joined once more by Thorin and a few others of the company. Rather than pretend politely that he had not heard, the king instantly demanded,
"In what light would he wish to leave? This is his home."
Bilbo almost laughed at the ferociousness in Thorin's face and the utter lack of awe on Gandalf's. Instead, he said, "No light at all, Thorin. Gandalf was only checking." Grumbling, the king accepted the cup of tea Bilbo offered and placed himself very obviously between the wizard and the hobbit.
"It would be a poor ending to our friendship, old man, if you tried to take my burglar. I was not aware that he was yours to keep,"
Gandalf said mildly. It caused Bilbo a little shock of pain to hear the wizard make so light of the dashing of all his hopes, but he smiled amiably in what he assumed was the dwarven custom, pretending that he had never had any such dreams at all. Perhaps custom decreed that as the one who did the rejecting, he was freer to act, because Thorin growled defensively up at the man.
"Maybe not. But if you try to take him when he does not wish to go, your magic had best be enough to defeat all the armies of the dwarves, and any who would call themselves my allies besides." "Peace!"
Gandalf gave them a little smile.
"I am not here for Bilbo. I wish to speak about your treaty with Rohan."
In fact, Gandalf had a number of points about the treaty that no one had yet considered, and some very good advice for both sides. Mutual defense at such a distance had seemed untenable during initial negotiations, but that was Gandalf. He was always thinking of defending the land against great armies of an unknown enemy. At least the enemy was unknown to Bilbo, for surely Azog was dead, and the ancient evils had passed into legend. Yet the wizard had been right to worry about orcs attempting to take Erebor, and Thorin was more willing than most to listen to his fears for the future. Bilbo had very little to offer in such councils, but he was honored to remain and listen. "Oh no," he said quickly, "you must not have Theodwin's son with Sigrid and Tario."
"Why not? They are friends, and will look well together, being of a height,"
Thorin asked. Bilbo hesitated. The truth was that if Tario did not get to stand among the veterans of the battle, Keeley would quite rightly pitch a fit. However, this truth was unlikely to sway Thorin. "Well, I shall need Tario's help in the morning to plant my acorn. Very complicated thing, planting acorns. Definitely more complicated than sticking it in the ground the right way up. Yes, sir. There was covering it with good soil as well. It might take us a little while, and then to get back to the ceremony in Dale. Best if you just leave it to us to sneak in and find a place. She's nearly as quiet on her feet as a hobbit, so we won't disturb anything." Frowning at Bilbo for a long moment, Thorin finally said,
"Fine. She may stand with the princes, but in return I will be the one to go with you in the morning to plant your tree."
Bilbo coughed. "Fair enough."
"I trust it will not take much of my time."
Bilbo rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. 5 minutes? Though, for the sake of argument, it does take the better part of an hour to walk to Dale, even if you hurry." Gandalf laughed at them both, then turned Thorin's attention back to the idea of dwarven craftsmen to aid in establishing fortifications around Edoras. If the treaty was to be signed with ceremony on Durin's Day, they had only a few hours left to amend it. Apparently, the idea of amending things at the last minute before the start of a new year was another great dwarvish tradition. This and Balin had both independently explained to Bilbo very carefully that the days leading up to Durin's Day were a time of apologies. because dwarves were stiff-necked at the best of times, and never more so than when they felt they were in the wrong. Such expressions of regret must be accepted with deliberate politeness. The phrase "think nothing of it," which tended to be the typical dwarven acceptance of an apology, was to be stricken from Bilbo's vocabulary for the duration. Instead, he was to name some small sum of money that could ease the suffering caused by whatever imagined slight the dwarf was apologizing for. 5 crowns seemed to be the lowest he could go without causing offense to his own, and at that rate he quickly made a great deal of coin. Most of it came from strangers apologizing for calling him a halfling months before, when they did not know any better. It was very silly to charge for such an honest mistake, but if he did not accept money, it seemed they would not believe that he accepted their apology. Still, it was not a wholly foolish tradition. Knowing it was a way of truly putting things in the past, gave Bilbo the impetus he needed to properly apologize for walking in on Thorin in the bath. Thorin accepted the apology readily, but he had the half-dozen which Bilbo had stammered at the time, and asked for 10 crowns as a way of completing the transaction. Emboldened by this success, Bilbo was able to give Balin 7 crowns for missing a meeting of the lords that he promised to attend. Beaufort accepted 5 while laughing for the time Bilbo had mocked the size of his feet while they were very, very drunk. Even Dis solemnly accepted 12 crowns for the time he'd offered her tea and then hadn't had the blend she preferred, despite the fact he'd been expecting her. These apologies were a way of proving one's consideration in a culture that did not give gifts. The hobbit found his academic interest engaged by the activity almost as much as his friendly affections were. While he understood and even appreciated the spirit of the practice, Bilbo did not particularly care for the final stages of the tradition. It seemed that to properly observe a spirit of atonement, dwarves must be given the opportunity to see and speak with everyone equally. This was important enough that everyone of any standing in the city had to miss dinner on the last evening before Thorin's Day to mill about the Hall of History, talking instead of eating. It was practically an elvish custom, but even saying that to Thorin hadn't gotten Bilbo out of attending. The night before Thorin's Day, all must have the opportunity to speak with all, no matter where they might be seated at table. Dis said, spouting egalitarian nonsense while depriving Bilbo of his basic right to have supper. There is food on those tables, Tadiel added unhelpfully.
But I am not over there, Bilbo groused. I am here, holding your dress.
Deeming Tadiel's dress acceptably simple for the occasion, Dis had publicly rebuked her and insisted that Bilbo hold up one end of the skirt while the dwarf carefully stitched diamonds along the hem. Believe me, I would free you if I could, my friend. Lady Dis, I ask again, may we not do this in private? We may not. Dis lowered her voice. Your gown is a little plain, but under other circumstances I would not care. The important thing is that all see me at work, giving both diamonds and craft to you on the day of amending. If you cannot start the new year with my block-headed brother's acceptance, at least you will have this, my apology for your mistreatment, before the eyes of all. That quite melted Tadiel's objections, but Bilbo continued to stare longingly at the food. It seemed unfair that Thorin and Gandalf both had little plates, when they ate less than anyone and only tasted good food if Bilbo brought it to their attention. Scolding himself for these uncharitable thoughts, Bilbo tried to focus on something other than his empty belly. He'd gotten too used to eating like a hobbit again if missing 2 meals could make him so grouchy. These mosaics are very nice, he added, nodding to the beautiful images of great battles and hard-working kings on the walls. One in particular struck him as looking very like Thorin, though the dwarf on the wall was smiling, so it must have been some other ancestor. He had a great axe in one hand, but his other was outstretched, proffering an enormous pile of gold to the viewer. Do you know if they were done by the same artisan who decorated Thorin's sitting room? Dis looked up at Bilbo curiously. Seeing that it was an honest question, she relaxed and answered, No, these are from long ago. Thorin did not make them. Oh! I had not realized that Thorin made the picture of our battle himself. Smiling, Dis said, So I perceived. He works his craft as a way to clear his mind, but though I know he would if he could, he has not time to decorate every room in Erebor on his own. Bilbo laughed, thinking about the tremendously detailed depiction of the Battle of 5 Armies in Thorin's rooms. He could not recall ever having complimented the king upon his work. Clearly that was an oversight. Perhaps Bilbo ought to apologize and make amends before the new year. Perhaps that would be reason enough to let someone else hold Tariel's dress so that he could head over to the food tables where Thorin was. Unfortunately, before Bilbo could try his line of argument on this, Thorin left his conversation with Gandalf and came over to them.
Here.
Thorin lifted a stuffed mushroom from his little plate and held it up to Bilbo's lips.
These are good. You should eat one before they are gone.
Time stopped. The scent of mushrooms filled the room, enriched by the subtle notes of Thorin himself. The offering fingers were thick and calloused, but all that was tender could be seen inscribed clearly within eyes as blue as the summer sky. With a gentle sigh, Bilbo's mouth opened of its own accord. Good, it was not nearly accolade enough for the flavors which then exploded upon the hobbit's tongue. Based within a smooth, gently roasted black trilby, the filling was savory and well salted. A crisp cap of toasted breadcrumbs trapped the delicate juices of the mushroom until they were freed by the ivory caress of a tooth.
"Oh, yes,"
Bilbo said when he had eaten the whole morsel. "Very good indeed." Attempting to master himself and remember that Thorin was a dwarf, and so not making a romantic overture with a gesture, he prattled on. "Was there something in particular that you wish to call my attention to? I detect a hint of cumin. If you like it, I could include it in my cooking more often." Thorin's eyes were very wide. For a second they flickered back to the tables where Gandalf was standing, but then the king straightened his back.
"I believe,"
he said slowly,
"I simply tasted it and thought you would enjoy the flavor."
"Oh!" Bilbo could not possibly be expected to possess such a charming sentiment expressed without the forthrightness of a dwarf. Swaying, he soon found himself clinging to Thorin's arm as though he would fall without it. "That is very kind." Bilbo was going to kiss him. There really was nothing else to be done in such a situation. Well, he could drop to his knees and fill his mouth that way, but they were in the middle of a party, in full view of a room full of people. Thorin had placed a mushroom in Bilbo's mouth. That must be a sign that he would at least let the hobbit kiss his fingers a little. Surely their two cultures could not be so different that Thorin could do such a thing with only platonic intentions. Unfortunately, they were. Dis sprang up between them, catching Thorin by the arm and pulling him away from Bilbo. "I would have words with you, my king," she growled, glaring at Bilbo for some reason before storming off with her brother in tow. They did not leave the room, only went to a corner to speak in low, angry voices, but it was very clear that Bilbo was not welcome to follow. So he was left bereft, standing alone in a room full of dwarves, aching with the absence of what had felt so briefly like affection.